So let's talk about the state of Sony cameras right now at the start of 2025. What should you buy? What should you not buy? Are there upgrades coming, or are these products the last of its kind? We will of course be covering the upcoming A7 IV, even the long-rumored flagship APSC camera, the A7000, and the craziest rumor of all time, the RX1R Mark III, the pocket fixed lens full-frame point-and-shoot camera, and of course, many more. We're gonna go by sensor sizes, 1-inch, APS-C, and then full frame, as I think that's easier and way more organized, at least for me.
1-inch sensor cameras.
Starting off with the premium 1-inch sensor pocket point and shoot, the RX100 series.
RX100.
Now, the RX100 Mark V is officially discontinued. It was a fantastic little camera with an amazing 24-70 f1.8 to 2.8 lens. Now, not surprising as this camera is old. We're talking 2016 old. And it was kind of replaced a long time ago. Back in 2020, Sony released the budget ZV-1, which uses the same lens, and since then, we've seen updated models for the ZV instead of the RX. So the only model left now is the RX100 Mark VII, which came out back in 2019. Don't worry about the 6, it sucked. When this first came out, the internet was not happy with the new lens, 24 to 200mm f2.8 to 4.5, simply because it no longer started at f1.8 in favor of increasing the zoom. But those who owned the 7 came to really appreciate the longer reach, and actually, within the last year, it started getting even more popular. It can do 20 frames per second, no blackout, raw continuous burst shooting with human and animal eye autofocus tracking. It's bonkers, which makes it incredibly sad we will likely not see an RX100 Mark VIII, because I truly believe we are one iteration away from it being perfect.
It's almost perfect.
The photo aspect is already perfect, but video? Man, if Sony can throw in 4K 60p 10-bit 422 AI autofocus tracking, it would just complete it. And they would never have to release another RX100 again, in my Vong opinion. And funny enough, we can kind of get a glimpse of the non-existent RX100 Mark VIII in these camcorders, the Z200 and NX800, which came out in mid-2024. Despite their look and size, they both use a small 1-inch sensor, but has a lot of the modern Sony tech inside that I want. But alas, what a shame. I still highly recommend the RX100 Mark VII, not at retail price, but if you can scoop it at a discount or secondhand under $1,000, it's not too shabby. And you can queue up my latest review on it right up here.
ZV-1.
Moving on to ZV-1, which again is the budget all-in-one point-and-shoot camera, but aimed at video creators. Now it's gonna get a little confusing here because there is the ZV-E1, and that's not the same thing. Here's a handy little chart. ZV in general is the budget series for every sensor sizes, and it's catered more towards video users. ZV-1 with no E is the 1-inch sensor. ZV-E10 is APS-C sensor, but the E in between means the camera can use interchangeable E-mount lenses, and the 10 just means it's mid-tier. ZV-E1 is full frame, and the standalone 1 means it's higher end. Capiche? Comprende? Wakarimaska? Now, there are two models of the ZV-1. The ZV-1 Mark I that came out in 2020 that uses the 24-70mm f1.8 to 2.8 lens, and the ZV-1 Mark II that came out in 2023 uses a wider 18-50mm f1.8 to 4.0 lens. God dang it, Sony and their confusing naming ass convention. Anyway, I recommend the Mark II simply because of the better and more modern UI, but if budget is tight, you can save $150 by getting the Mark I instead. But for a more in-depth comparison between the two, you can check out my review right up here. Now, we will likely not see a Mark III of the ZV-1 for at least another year or so.
APS-C cameras.
Moving on to APS-C cameras. Starting off with the ZV-E10 Mark II, came out just last year, July 2024, hot off the press, the latest and greatest iteration, so no update for a while. This is the budget alternative to the Cinema FX30 and hybrid A6700. Now, the biggest flaw with the ZV-E10 Mark II, in my opinion, is that it lacks in-body image stabilization compared to the other two cameras. But aside from that, a very serious contender for budget cinema camera under $1,000, simply because it can shoot S-Log3 10-bit 422 4K 60p with real-time LUT preview. While it can take photos, it doesn't have a mechanical shutter, so photographers who use flash or shoot photos with lots of motion indoor with LED lighting should be very aware. It's considered to be the second biggest flaw because the previous Mark I did have a mechanical shutter. But if you need a true 50-50 hybrid camera, I would sway you more towards the A6700 instead. I wouldn't recommend the Mark I unless you're an absolute beginner with a very tight budget. If you have the budget and you're very serious about video and some cinema work, get the Mark II. If you're a pro, the Mark II makes a great BCD, EFG, XYJK, LMNOP camera to every upcoming Sony camera on this list, and I highly recommend queuing up my review for the ZV-E10 Mark II if you want to learn more about it.
FX30.
Now, FX is the cinema series, the cinema alternative to the Alpha series, which are the true hybrid photo and video models. What makes these cinema is the film lingo on the labels, built-in fan for better cooling, and accurate frame rate options, so instead of 23.976, you get true 24.0000 FPS. There are, of course, loads more differences, but that's all you need to know. For now. There are 4 FX cameras, but we'll only talk about 2 in this video. FX30 is everything that the FX3 is minus the full frame low light sensor. Although it came out in 2022, we're not going to see an update for the FX30 this year. It's going to be whenever the full frame FX3 gets a version 2, and then at least another year after that before we'll see an FX30 Mark II. But the good news is we're starting to see discounts for this camera at official retailers, so keep your eyes peeled for lower pricing, cause it's gonna be a steal.
A6700.
A6700, the no-compromise APS-C hybrid camera. Mechanical shutter, viewfinder, in-body image stabilization, 4K 120 frames per second, 10-bit 422 with real-time LUT preview. Man, this camera has it all for $1,400 body only. Now, this came out in summer 2023, so no update in sight. Maybe some discount towards the end of the year, and this camera would be my top recommendation. For all the reasons why, you can queue up my 2024 re-review right up here.
A7000?
Alright, so let's talk about the mythical A7000, also known as the A6 or A6900. Nice. So this is a long community rumor that there's supposed to be a baby A9 in which we would get between 20 to 120 frames per second, no blackout raw continuous burst shooting with anti-distortion electronic silent shutter, but with an APS-C sensor at an affordable price. Affordable is gonna be very subjective, given the fact that the current A9 Mark III is $6,000, the A9 Mark II is $4,500, so a baby version of those would at least cost $3,000, because there ain't no way that this camera is gonna be sub $2,000, even if it were to exist. In fact, I really don't think we'll ever see a flagship APS-C model of this caliber. You're better off scooping up a used A9 Mark I or Mark II or even an A1 Mark I, because the used prices for those are very enticing. For example, you can get an A9 Mark I under $2,000. But of course, we're gonna see another A6000 model for sure, maybe A6900 or A6700 Mark II, whatever they decide to call it in a few years, possibly a slight megapixel bump to 33, maybe increase to 20 frames per second raw continuous burst, but even then, that's being a little too hopeful, and I'm sorry if I crushed anyone's dreams today. I wanna be wrong on this one, so let's just say the mythical baby A9 is just not gonna happen this year. Don't forget, we still need to talk about the upcoming A7 V and the highly anticipated, rumored compact full-frame camera, the RX1R Mark III. However, there's someone in your life right now that's feeling a little neglected. Perhaps you should get them a gift. Of course, I'm talking about a gift for your camera. Why not get your camera some new batteries from K&F Concept? Full kit comes with a charger that charges via USB-C and micro USB. Or store your camera's abundant SD cards in this K&F memory case. Fits up to 12 cards and it comes with a string. or keep the lights on longer in your own house with a K&F Concept V-mount battery. And it can charge your laptop on the go. Wow.
But what about a gift for me?
I got you a ring.
Oh.
A K&F Concept step-up ring.
You're just sleeping on the couch tonight.
All this for an affordable price from our sponsor, K&F Concept. Links to all these accessories in the pinned comment and description box below. Wait, come back. I still need you to announce the next set of cameras.
Full frame cameras.
Now let's move on to full frame cameras.
ZV-E1.
Starting off with my favorite camera of all time, the ZV-E1. Budget full frame video camera that's literally just as good as the FX3 and the A7S III, which those two are regarded as some of the best video cameras in the world. Now, sadly, the ZV-E1 is just not that popular, especially when it first came out. The price tag was too high for beginners to even consider it, and pros didn't take it seriously because it does overheat if you shoot 4K for more than 20 minutes continuously. Now, if you shoot like 5-minute clips at a time, it's not going to be a problem, and a 5-minute take is a very long time, mind you. If you do hour-long podcast recording, then of course get the other models, but the ZV-E1 as a pocket full-frame cinema camera, oh, it's a dream. And a lot of creators recently are beginning to realize that, especially those who use higher-end stuff. They're starting to appreciate the ZV-E1 more because it's literally the budget version of the best video cameras in the world. These three here share the same low light sensor, but the ZV-E1 is much lighter in comparison, while giving people the same quality for $1,500 to $2,000 less. When you respect the limitation of this camera, this price tag is a steal. Especially now we are seeing some nice discounts happening with authorized retailers. I do highly recommend the ZV-E1. However, I am skeptical that this camera will ever get updated. Like I said, it's just not that popular, so unless there's a surge of people buying it all of a sudden, this might just be the last of its kind. Which may not be a bad thing. I mean, this camera is very close to perfect in my opinion. If it were to get updated, then the FX3 and the A7S III would need to be updated first, and then we'll see the ZV-E1 Mark II at least another year later. But my hopes for a Mark II is just sadly incredibly low. But let's move on to some juicy stuff. The A7 V.
A7 V.
So the A7 III came out in 2018, the A7 IV came out in 2021. So going by that gap logic, yeah, it's about time. Rumors are saying Q1, so between now and March, but I wouldn't be surprised if it showed up later this year. Like I'm talking summer or fall 2025. It will take on the current $2,500 price tag, with the previous model dropping down to around $2,000. Now the big thing I want to see them upgrade in the A7 V is 4K 60p in full frame mode, please. It's a full frame camera, Sony. No reason to force users into a 1.5x crop just to shoot at a certain frame rate. As a matter of fact, they have to include 4K 120 frames per second now for the A7 V. Just please do not force us into a crop. 10% crop is fine for 4K 120p, but not a full-on APSC Super 35 crop. That should never be a thing with full frame cameras. Of course, we'll get all the AI autofocus in both photo and video mode. I would love to see 8 stop of in-body image stabilization, if not at least 7. Maybe a megapixel bump, 33 to 40 now. I don't know, Fujifilm over there tossing 40 megapixel sensor into the APS-C cameras, so why not? Maybe we'll finally see a true 6K option as well. Aside from that, I mean, I don't really know what else Sony could throw in without risking this camera to be better than some of their current high-end models. That's why I'm okay with them delaying the A7 V to the end of 2025, while giving us some big head-turning upgrades with the upcoming A7R6 or an A7S IV Q1, Q2, and then have those upgrades trickle down to the A7 V. Either way, a new alpha hybrid full frame camera is coming this year, so hold your horses, let's wait. If you can't wait though, you really need the A7 IV right this second, then at the very least get it at around $2,000 new, because that will be its new base price when the A7 V drops.
A7R6.
Moving on to the A7R6, also a full-frame camera that is due for an upgrade, given the fact that the A7R4 came out in 2019 and the A7R5 in 2022. If not this year, then maybe early 2026. So, are they going to be taking it up a notch? 60 to 80 megapixels? Perhaps even 100 megapixels? Or will they finally go medium format with the R series? That's just crazy talk. Unless... No, it has to be crazy talk, because then they would have to come out with new sets of lenses to fit the sensor. Right? Anyways, now I'm fine with them going higher in megapixels, but maybe it's time for Sony to update their software and UI. Now, I have a long laundry list of things, but for high resolution cameras such as the A7R, what I would love to see is a more streamlined in-camera crop to zoom feature, sort of like what Leica and Fuji are doing with the Q and the X100 series, you know? For example, if I mount a 35mm prime lens, I want to be able to do an in-camera crop with real-time preview for framing purposes. At 35mm, full 100 megapixels, press the button, 2x zoom, 70mm, but at 50 megapixels, that's still a lot to work with. Press the button again, 4x zoom, 140mm equivalent now, but 24 megapixels. And 24 megapixels is still plenty enough in this day and age. Press the button one more time, 8x zoom, 280mm, 12 megapixels, and hey buddy, 12 megapixel, we can still work with that. Now imagine that. Imagine 35 to 280mm with just a 35mm prime lens. Now my math may not be mathing, I'm the only Asian who failed math in the world, but I don't think it's crazy talk, you know what I mean? Sony already has something like this called Super 35 mode and clear image zoom, which already gives us 1.5x crop and another 2x zoom when you have both enabled. However, it's just super clunky for what I'm talking about. All I'm asking them is to streamline that crop experience with high megapixel cameras, because Sony has a lot of high quality lenses already, right? G Master resolving the full ass 100 megapixel resolution. It's time we can get those juicy in-camera crop options. If we shoot RAW, then yeah, give us that full 100 megapixels, but JPEG option should be whatever the crop length that we determine it to be. That would be the wildest thing ever, like holy cow, I want that. Now some of you, Michael, are saying, just crop in post, bro. Just crop in post. No, I want to see the crop now so I can frame things properly, damn it.
A7S Mark IV and FX3 Mark II.
Moving on to the S series, A7S4, and we might as well throw this in, the FX3 Mark II. Now the A7S3 is definitely due for an update since it's coming up on nearly 5 years now. Holy cow, A7S3, 5 years ago. But I honestly don't think we'll see an A7S4 per se. The A7S was incredibly popular with video folks for its insane low light, high ISO performance and no compromise 4K quality. But ever since the release of the FX3, which literally uses the same sensor, but because that's getting myriad of software updates that really tuned it to become a mega cinema powerhouse, it became vastly different from the A7S3. And a lot of filmmakers shifted to that, and I really don't blame them. The FX3 is truly a cinematic gem, and it's hard to recommend the A7S as a photo camera because of the 12 megapixel sensor. So I wouldn't be surprised if the A7S3 is the last of its kind. I still love and use my A7S III because of the viewfinder, and I'm probably the only Sony YouTuber who never transitioned over to the FX3. But alas, the A7S4 will likely exist in a future FX3 Mark II instead. And there's a slight chance that we'll see that maybe this year, if not early 2026. So if you can afford to wait, just wait. If not, these two are some of the best cameras that you can get today for filmmaking.
A7C Mark II and A7CR.
Moving on to A7C II and A7CR. Now, both of these came out in 2023, so we will likely not see a refresh for these two cameras for at least another 2 years. Their bigger counterparts will need to be updated first, since the A7 II is modeled after the A7 IV, and the A7CR is modeled after the A7R5. And we already know both of those cameras will probably get an update this year. So maybe late 2026 or early 2027 we will see a refresh for these two compact cameras. But I mean, both of these are already so dang good already. I love the A7CR. I've been using a hell of a lot more than I expected just because it's so small and compact, and it does at 1.5x crop me at 4K 60p. And we'll likely see some fat, juicy discounts for both of these cameras at the end of this year, so keep your eyes peeled. If you have trouble choosing between the two, check out my buying guide linked right up here.
RX1R Mark III?
Now, speaking of compact, a lot of people are waiting for this. The RX1R Mark III. Let me just inhale some hopium right now because I really want this to be true too. So, there is a rumor with lots of smoke that there will be an RX1R Mark III in 2025. The RX1 line is a series of fixed lens cameras with a full frame sensor. Right now, Fuji is munching on Sony in terms of a fixed lens, compact, everyday carry camera setup a la the X100VI. And there is a rumor that Fuji will release a medium format version of the X100 this year. So, there is a chance Sony can hit them back with a premium full-frame compact camera priced between the X100VI and whatever the hell the medium format version is going to cost. Right now, Sony is still selling the current RX1R Mark II for $3,300, but it's incredibly dated in terms of software, so it's not worth it at all. The RX1R Mark II was based off of the A7R Mark II sensor, so an RX1R Mark III will likely be based off of the current 60 megapixel A7R5. In terms of lens, they were using the Zeiss 35mm f2, so would Sony continue with that, or are they going to develop their own G-Master version? And if they do develop their own, will they keep it at 35, or will they make it 28mm or 40mm or both? Because that's what Leica is doing right now with their Q3. They have a 28mm and a 43mm version. That's tough. If only we can just, I don't know, change the lens out to whatever hell focal length we want. Oh wait, we already have that, the A7CR. Yes, it's the closest thing that we got as a competing premium compact full frame camera, and it's already out with Sony's latest technology. AI autofocus, 10-bit 422, bigger battery. I don't think people really need to wait. The A7CR is right here. But I know, Michael, I know. I too want it even smaller. I would love to see this compact full frame camera come back with a flash and a pop-up viewfinder. But I do think the price is going to be a huge problem. I don't think the RX1R Mark III will be less than the A7CR. In fact, it's probably gonna cost the same, if not even more. Now, to solve that price problem, I mean, could we make it cheaper? I mean, do we really need it to be an RX1R Mark III, or can it be an RX1, not R, RX1 Mark II between 24 to 33 megapixels? But then we already have the A7C II, so it's quite the conundrum. But I'll leave it to you guys to debate it out. Do we need an RX1R Mark III, or is the A7CR already that type of camera for us? And if you're someone who's waiting for an RX1R Mark III, why not get an A7CR? Let me know in the comments down below. Either way, if this were to come out, it's gonna be pricey. But at least it's gonna be more affordable than a Leica. And possibly better too. I kid. Don't come after me.
Flagship cameras.
Alright, so let's wrap things up with the flagship cameras.
A9 Mark III and A1 Mark II.
Now, the A9 Mark III came out at the start of 2024, while the A1 Mark II ended 2024. So, of course, no updates for either of these until maybe 2027. The biggest deal about these two cameras is the pre-capture feature, which the camera is already taking photos within the last second of you pressing the shutter. Great for wildlife photography, great for sports photography, and especially great for those of you who always miss the moment.
Who, me?
Now, the A9 Mark III is a 24 megapixel sensor that can do 120 frames per second, no blackout, raw continuous burst shooting, and it has global shutter, while the A1 Mark II does not have global shutter, but it is a 50 megapixel sensor with 30 frames per second, no blackout, raw continuous burst shooting with better ISO and dynamic range performance. But this video is not about choosing between the two for you. Cameras like these, you will need proper research and personal testing, so please rent it. But I will vouch for the original A1 at its new price point, 5,000 buckaroos. While it doesn't have the AI autofocus or real-time LED preview, the original A1 is still an overkill camera simply because it was way too ahead of its time when it first came out back in 2021. 30 frames per second, no blackout at 50 megapixel 8K 30p 10-bit 422. It's just bonkers how good this camera is. And the fact that it got a price drop because of the new Mark II means in the used market, we'll see an even bigger discount. If you don't need global shutter or pre-capture, then the original A1 is a whopping deal and I can highly recommend it. So now you're up to date with what's going on with Sony cameras at the start of 2025. It will be a very interesting year with the new full-frame cameras coming out, so subscribe and stay tuned for my reviews on future models. And hey, if you love me, then stick around to listen to what my sponsor, Squarespace, has to say. Squarespace is an all-in-one platform to create beautiful websites. No coding knowledge needed. Just simply choose from their many templates and designs. Perfect for photographers and online shop owners. Use my link down below for a 14-day free trial, and when you're ready to launch, you can use my code JASONVONG to save 10% off your first purchase of your website or domain. Guys, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you guys in the next video. Peace.
Where's my bread?